Thank you for joining early. We will get started at 12 noon, so just hang tight and we'll get started shortly in about 5 minutes. Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started there now. Miigwech merci beaucoup, and thank you for joining us today for our health sciences webinar using augmentative and alternative communication and introduction. My name is Bethany Thompson, and I'm the Health Sciences Programs and Partnerships Coordinator here at Nawsum University, and today's webinar is being delivered by Jocelyn Kennedy. Before we get started, I will do a land acknowledgement and formally introduce our speaker. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, Nawsum University respectfully acknowledges that our pan-northern campus is on the homelands of First Nations and Métis people. The university buildings we occupy in Greater Sudbury and Thunder Bay are located on the territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, specifically Atikameksheng and Wanapitei First Nations and Fort William First Nation. Beyond a land acknowledgement, we understand that reconciliation is a practice. We gratefully acknowledge the elders and knowledge keepers who share their gifts and teachings with us so that we may better understand and honor their wisdom and that of all the traditional keepers of this land. Nawsum University will continue to practice reconciliation by listening, learning, and fostering a culture of mutual respect and trust. We kindly ask that you keep your microphone muted throughout the session today unless you are asking or responding to a question. This will help to minimize background noise and ensure the best experience for everyone. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Rehabilitation Sciences and Dietetic Practicum Program web pages. Additionally, you can find links to our past health sciences webinars hosted on the NASM YouTube channel in the resources section of these two web pages. By completing an evaluation for these archived webinars, you can earn a certificate for your professional development records. Should you have any questions during the presentation, you are encouraged to submit them via the chat feature, which I will be monitoring closely. These questions will be read aloud during the dedicated Q&A session at the conclusion of today's webinar. I'd like to introduce you to Jocelyn Kennedy. Jocelyn Kennedy is a speech-language pathologist with over 7 years of experience. She works with the pediatric population at Firefly out of the Kenora office, though travels to all Firefly offices in the Kenora-Rainy River region for her work. Jocelyn received her bachelor's degree in Arts and Science and Political Science from McMaster University and Bachelor's of Education from Queen's University before receiving a master's in Speech-Language Pathology from the University of Queensland in Brisbane, Australia. Jocelyn was part of the team that helped develop the newest general level augmentative and alternative communication clinic at Firefly. She has her individual authorizer certification to prescribe communication tools and devices. Jocelyn loves her work in AAC, especially working with schools and caregivers to implement strategies to help AAC users grow their communication skills. Jocelyn, thanks so much for presenting today, and I'm going to pass it over to you to start the presentation.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen so that we can work off of the PowerPoint. Can we see that okay? I think so, yes.
That's perfect. Thanks, Jocelyn.
Okay. That was a nice introduction. So I am Jocelyn Kennedy, a speech-language pathologist in the pediatric population. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that I mostly work with pediatric clients because I know there's some people joining from the hospital setting. I'm not sure if most people are working with adults or working with peds as well. But as you said in the introduction, I have helped develop a lot of augmentative and alternative communication programming and implementation across Northwestern Ontario, and helped to develop our new general level augmentative communication clinic. Yeah, and I love my work that I do in AAC. So today, we're gonna cover kind of like an introductory level for augmentative and alternative communication. So I'm hoping that everybody can identify at least 3 different types of augmentative and alternative communication tools, and how to use them, what types of purposes you might use them for, and then to explain how to support users through aided language stimulation, which is like how you model communication for AAC users, like particularly developmental communication users, and then identify some opportunities where you can integrate augmentative communication into daily routines and activities. So this presentation, I use something similar when I talk to caregivers and educators when I'm teaching them how to use communication tools with the children that they support. But I'm hoping that everybody can get some use out of it. And then towards the end of the presentation, I'm going to share some of the resources that I typically will share with the caregivers and educators, and kind of talk about how I use those resources to help support them in using those tools with the children that they work with. So we're just going to start super basic with understanding what communication is. So communication is just the act of sending and receiving meaningful messages between people. The communication is like a cyclical turn-taking piece. You can't just communicate in one direction, that it's a back and forth kind of conversation as well. Communication is also more than just the words that we use. We use lots of nonverbal communications in our day-to-day communications. We use facial expressions, we use body language, We use lots of gestures, we use non-speech sounds, and the children that we support with accessing communication tools are using those types of communication skills all the time, and are using that as their primary mode of communication, often when we're first exploring augmentative communication tools. When we think about communication, there's kind of like 4 general purposes for communication. For the children that are not able to use their spoken communication as effectively or at all, oftentimes what we want to do as the people supporting them is like we just want to try to figure out what their wants and needs are, what they want to be able to communicate to us. But I often point out to caregivers and educators that requesting and trying to meet your wants and needs is only one part of communication, that we communicate for more purposes than just trying to request. So that when we're modeling and showing kids how to use communication skill or communication tools, that we want to make sure that we're trying to meet some of these other communication purposes as well. I see a lot of kids where we're seeing them kind of at the kindergarten age, or maybe a little bit older. And often we'll point out that like a lot of the kids in kindergarten, the primary purpose of communication is to facilitate that social closeness and connect with their peers. We want to make sure that we're showing kids how to communicate in a way that they can connect with others socially as well. So that is what I always want to point out to educators and to parents and caregivers as well. So what is augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC? Basically, it's like any mode of communication that's not directly speaking with your mouth. So when your natural speech doesn't meet your communication needs. So for example, this is just in the clinic what we tend to see. Either the child is non-speaking, or maybe they use only a few spoken words, or they have really unintelligible speech. So they might be saying a full sentence, but it's really difficult for other people to understand them. So that's not meeting their communication need of having other people understand what they are trying to say. We use AAC tools, or augmentative communication tools, to kind of build a bridge between what the speaker wants to communicate and what they're able to be, what other people are able to understand. So we use those tools to help them learn how to express their message in a way that they're best understood. So there's lots of different types of augmentative and alternative communication. So there's some pictures here to kind of demonstrate what types of options we explore in the clinic. So the first kind of natural piece of augmentative and alternative communication is that signs and gestures. So that's typically what you would naturally be doing to help a child that is like non-speaking or might have really difficult to understand speech to be able to express themselves. You might be initially going towards a couple of key signs like more, all done, drink, eat, and using gestures like pointing or acting things out to give them a way to communicate what they are trying to express. Then there is the picture exchange communication system. That's that picture right there. I don't know if you can see my mouse moving. I hope you can. And so for picture exchange communication system, this is a system that was developed through like more behavior therapy principles, and is really focused on like initiation and requesting. So sometimes that can be helpful as a part of their communication tools. But I would say that oftentimes like PECs can be kind of limiting because it only focuses really on that requesting. There's like a little bit of commenting that comes towards the end of their program. But there are other ways that you can kind of increase the robustness of the communication by using some other tools. There are these tools right here. This one's called a Big Mac, and this is an example of a single button voice output device. What you do with this one is you can pre-record one message, and then the child or the person is able to select the button and it'll say the message that you've pre-recorded in it. There's also a multi-button voice output device. So the example here is a GoTalk. That works pretty similarly to those single button voice output devices. The only difference is that, like, instead of you're only recording one message, you can record many messages based on the number of cells that are in the device. This one has like 5 levels as well, so you can switch out the paper inlay for 5 different ones that you can use to select, and then it'll say the message that you've pre-recorded. And then there are the communication boards. So these ones here that are just like paper-based communication systems. These 2 are examples of communication, like paper-based versions of communication systems that are also available as like a high-tech option. So that's like your app that you would put on an iPad, or they have like fully dedicated devices based on the program that you're using as well. And these are all called dynamic display voice output devices because the display changes dynamically. And when you select the button, it'll say the word. So that's the voice output part. Usually when I'm talking about when we're selecting between high tech, low tech, light tech, that if you go with something that's a little bit more high tech, like an iPad or a dedicated device, it is a good idea to have like a low tech backup because technology fails sometimes, and you always want the child to have an option, like a backup option, to be able to communicate if they're not able to use their high-tech communication system. I think especially for us living up here in the north, it is too cold in the winter to be able to take iPads outside and use them effectively. Even some of these other like battery powered items, I'm not sure even how effective they work in, I don't know, -30. So it is helpful to have other paper-based options to use in those times where it's too difficult to use high tech because they won't work out in our elements. When we're thinking about the vocabulary that is like programmed into devices and the vocabulary that we're modeling with our communication systems, we kind of split that up into 2 general categories of core words and fringe words. And I'll be using those words kind of throughout the rest of the presentation as well. Core words are a small set of high frequency words, so words that you use all the time. And you can combine those words to make like sentences and make things more complex. And they usually contain things like pronouns, helping verbs, prepositions, articles, and common verbs. I'm just going to flash forward so you can kind of see based on the pictures. Typically when I'm describing like core words and fringe words to family members and educators, I'll say that like the core words are essentially the words that you would find on like the home page of your like dynamic device. So these are words that you can use to talk very generally about lots of different things. They're not necessarily tied to like one specific context, but you can talk about you can use them to talk generally about lots of things. You can ask questions, you can make comments, you can make requests. So they can be really great for talking very generally. And to use like kind of one word at a time to be able to express a lot of different things. On the other side of things are fringe words. So these are a large set of low frequency words. And these are words that are tied to a specific context or a particular situation, and would include like your nouns, adjectives, and verbs. So I typically then will explain that the fringe words are the words that you would find in the different categories on a communication device, or like on the communication board, they'd be like the flips that you have at the top. These are words that add context to a particular situation. So for example, like a core word could be eat, that you talk a lot about. You can talk about eating lots of different things, and you can talk about it a little bit more generally. But mustard is very specific to mustard, that you are talking about mustard specifically. So mustard would be more of like a fringe word, and eat is a core word. You can, the great thing about fringe words is that they provide a lot of context, and that they are oftentimes, especially if they are nouns, they're usually just a picture of that particular item. So it can be a lot easier for kids, especially when they're getting used to a device, to be able to find like the pictures of the items that they find most motivating. So it's really great when you're modeling, if you model kind of a balance between core and fringe words. It doesn't mean that you like only have to do core, because you can talk about lots of different things using less words, but you don't only want to use fringe words, because you won't be able to kind of build up your sentence or your understanding of things in the same way. So it's a good idea to be balancing a mix of core and fringe. So we'll get into now what aided language stimulation is. So typically for the speech pathologists out there, I typically talk before I talk about the aided part of aided language stimulation, I like to just go over with people what language stimulation is. Because language stimulation is really all of those really great strategies that often we use naturally when we're talking with really young kids when they're first learning how to use language to communicate. So we use strategies like talking about the things that they're focused on. We typically will decrease our rate of speech, like slow our speech down so that we're really focusing in on what they're trying to communicate. We'll use a lot of repetition. We'll emphasize certain words that we want them to learn. So for example, I typically will say, like when I was talking to my young niece when she was first learning how to communicate, if we were sitting down at the table and maybe she was eating some goldfish crackers, I might say, let's eat some goldfish. Ooh, yummy goldfish crackers. Do we want some more goldfish? Let's have some more. So I'm emphasizing the word that I'm wanting her to kind of tune into. I'm decreasing the amount of words that I'm using, and I'm also repeating words a lot as well. So the only difference between language stimulation and aided language stimulation is that aided means that you're also pairing that spoken word with a symbol. So you pair the spoken word with the symbol during an activity that the learner is focused on, so that you can teach them how to use that symbol to communicate what they might be trying to communicate through that activity. So for example, in that that eating example, instead of just saying the word eat or saying the word more, I might have a communication board or a communication device, and I'm selecting the symbol while I'm saying that. So do we want to eat goldfish crackers? Let's have some more. I love goldfish crackers. So you're pairing that symbol with that spoken word in something that they're focused on. The real big thing to remember is that when we're doing aided language stimulation, our purpose is to teach the learner how to use that word in the future. It's not to test them. So we're not saying like, touch, eat, say eat before you give, or say more before you give them goldfish crackers. You might demonstrate how to do that multiple times while you maybe give them another goldfish cracker or do another activity that's based on what you're communicating. And maybe you decrease the amount or you increase the amount of pause time that you have after you are expecting them to request more, or to say go if you're racing cars around or something like that. So you're really focusing on the teaching aspect and not testing or pushing them to communicate if they're not ready to do so, or if you haven't really modeled those words before. I think I did not. Oh, here we go. I'm going to play a little video, hopefully, for you to kind of get an overview of the aided language stimulation. Here we go.
Learning to communicate using picture systems can be challenging for anyone who is nonverbal, minimally verbal, or is an emerging communicator. It can be especially difficult if the student has autism. This video will explain one strategy used to support language development and teach children to communicate with their picture-based augmentative communication systems. This strategy is called aided language. Aided language is also known as aided language stimulation, aided language input, aided language immersion, or augmented language. It was created by Elder, Gossens, and Crane and is based on the idea that by watching others use pictures during motivating activities, children begin to learn that the picture symbols can be used as communication tools. To practice aided language, we model or provide examples to the child of how to communicate using pictures. The concept is simple. You have to speak with pictures if you want them to speak in pictures. If you were teaching them French, you would speak to them in French. They have to be exposed to people speaking with pictures in order to learn how to speak with pictures like you would do in any language immersion program. This is how it would look like. You will pair the key word with his pictures as you talk. For example, if you want to tell the child time to eat your crackers, you would point to crackers. As you get better at speaking with pictures, you will start using more keywords. For example, you might say, time to eat your crackers. In addition to modeling directives, you also need to comment on what the child is hearing, seeing, and doing with body language. For example, if you see that the child is resting his head on the table and rubbing his eyes, you can say, I think you're tired. Aided language can be used with low-tech communication systems or high-tech communication systems. In this next video, you're going to see a child with his EA and his EA providing support with a high-tech communication device that she carries.
Need a break? Okay, Ryan, no, not yet. I need you to have something to eat. Good job.
You should use aided language to model communication for many purposes, such as making comments. Look, ball go in. Asking questions. Where did you go? sharing information. She has new shoes. And greetings. Hi, how are you? Remember, we are using pictures to provide examples so that the child learns to use pictures to communicate back to us. So we need to talk about things that the child finds interesting, motivating, and useful. Use short, simple language, speak slowly, and pause at times during the conversational flow. Use lots of repetition as you describe ongoing events. Keep in mind that this will initially slow down your communication, but that's okay because you're also learning, and this will help you to understand how hard it is to use picture-based augmentative communication systems. It is just like learning a new language. To maximize the child's learning, we should aim to use pictures to communicate with the child at least 20 times per hour. This might sound like too much on top of everything else you have to do, but think about how verbal kids learn to talk. By the time they are 18 months old, they have been exposed to approximately 4,400 hours of language. That is 8 hours a day of hearing spoken language for 18 months. So, if a nonverbal child is exposed to picture-based communication for only 10 minutes per day, then it would take them 84 years to reach the same level of language exposure as the 18-month-old verbal child. Our goal is that the child will eventually start pointing at the pictures to tell you things, praise them, and continue using aided language to have a conversation with them. Aided language should be used in a turn-taking manner, and focus should be placed on having an enjoyable, shared interaction together.
Okay, so lots of information in that video. I know it's kind of like an older video, but I think it does a really great job of giving like a great overview of what aided language stimulation is and how you can use it when you're teaching a child how to use it to communicate. Here are some of the things that like I often will then point out to kind of take away from that video. So the first thing is that you're not pointing to every single word that you say. We're not expecting people that are modeling on a communication device to like automatically be fluent in how to communicate using the device. So you want to kind of start by using 1 to 2 words more than what the child is currently using. So if they're just getting started on using the device, they probably aren't using any words consistently. So you can typically model like 1 to 2 words within a sentence or within a phrase to get started. The other thing is that you really want to make sure that you are doing aided language stimulation, especially at the beginning during super motivating activities. You want the child to be super engaged and interested in what you're doing so that they want to communicate about it, that there is something to communicate about. I always give the example that like as adults, we don't like participating in conversations about things that are not interesting for us. So for me, I'm like, if you engage me in a conversation about golf, I probably won't be that interested or adding much to the conversation. If you talk to me about Bravo or the Real Housewives, I'll talk your ear off. So it really is dependent on the child, like what is super motivating for them. So being able to have like a strong relationship with them to know what is going to be engaging and interesting is a great place to start. We also want to be trying to create like an immersive language environment. Using augmentative communication is like using a new language, and depending on which system you are using, like those are different parts of languages as well. So if that at the very end of that video, it says like if you are only modeling like 10 minutes a day, like it'll take the child 84 years to get the same language exposure that like an 18-month-old gets from like their spoken language being used around them. So we really want to try to increase the likelihood of an immersive language environment by trying to include it in lots of parts across their day, by having like communication boards up in different areas of the house or at the school. And I always have, it's overwhelming, I think, for like EAs, for teachers, for parents to be told like you need to be modeling like so many times an hour. So I usually am like, let's start small, let's get comfortable using it. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you are as well, because you are also learning a new language. This is immersive for you as well. So we start small, and then we're working our way up to trying to be able to model consistently throughout the day. The other piece from the video is that you want to observe what the child might be trying to communicate, and then you're kind of interpreting that using the communication device as well. So the example they gave there, like if they're like yawning, if they're like leaning on the table, you might be like, oh, I think maybe you feel tired, or maybe you're feeling bored if it's not an activity that they're super engaged in. So you're trying to kind of show them what words would work for them to be able to communicate those things in the future as well. You also want to be, when you're modeling, making sure, again, that you're not only modeling requesting, but you're modeling multiple purposes of communication. You're modeling commenting, you're modeling questions. You can model some like jokes. You can be joking back and forth to show them how to use humor. So we want to make sure that while requesting is an important part of communication, especially for kids that have had a hard time being able to be heard and understood, we want to make sure that we're expanding on that and not kind of getting stuck in the requesting piece. And then we want to make sure that we're repeating a lot. So we're repeating our phrasing a lot so that they can learn how to use those words as well. We're slowing down our rate of communication, and we're really emphasizing those words that we're wanting them to learn as well. I think a big piece as well, especially at the very beginning, is that you want to be talking and modeling even if they are not talking and using the device back with you. If you think about teaching like language skills to a baby, we don't just not talk to a baby because they're not talking back to us. We want to make sure that we're giving them lots of modeling before we're even expecting them to be able to use it back with us. And then you want to be building language on what they're already communicating. So like I said at the beginning, that you're using only like 1 to 2 words more than what they're currently using. If they are starting to use more words, you can kind of expand on what they're saying as well. So for example, if they select cracker, you could say, oh, you want to eat cracker, or you want more cracker, or you want or maybe you want to feed the puppet a cracker or something like that. So you're expanding on what they're saying so they can be more specific in the future. And then the last piece is that you really want to presume competence, that the child is going to be able to communicate. They just have to find the right tools and the right instruction to help them reach their communication skills competency. So you always want to make sure that we're presuming that they're able to do it so that we can give them the tools to be able to communicate. So in summary for that piece, we want to make sure that we're providing language input across lots of different environments and activities. We're not only doing it in one location and one circumstance. We want to make sure that we're providing context when we're interpreting. And then we want to make sure that when we're interpreting, we're really trying to get into the mind of the child that we're working with so that we can really try to understand with their subtle, like nonverbal cues, what they are trying to communicate. And I think for that piece, like it's so important to develop a good relationship with the child that you're working with, so that you can kind of like focus in on what they might be trying to communicate and interpret. And then the last piece there is that it should never be a test, that we're always having fun together in our communication. We're always trying to explore communication together during engaging and fun activities. Also accept that you are going to make mistakes because you're learning how to use language too. Oftentimes that is a great way of being like, oh, I didn't mean to say that. And then you can show them how to delete or clear the message as well, because that's not what you were trying to communicate. The more that you model on the communication devices, the better you're going to get at it. I use multiple different communication devices with different kids, and it is tricky when you're like switching between them and when you're first learning a new one to know where things are. But the more that you do it, the better you're going to get at it, the more muscle memory that you have about where the words are located. And like the best part is that like you just have fun with kids when you're working on augmentative communication, because you're trying to find engaging activities that'll help them expand on their language skills. So trying to make it fun will also make the intervention better too. So I have a couple of video examples of modeling as well, to give you an idea of what it looks like in practice. So I'm going to share that now.
Hi everyone, Amanda here. I'm one of the speech pathologists on the assistive wear team, and today we've come to play. This is just a quick activity that you might like to try. I've been doing it for years. The kids always love it. So, and all you need is some friends, any friends will do, and some food, any food will do. Now I've got some choice cards here, but you don't need to use that because kids can make choices from the real objects or using their AAC as well. So let's go. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm gonna look. Oh, whoa, look at Mr. Lion. He looks very hungry. He looks very hungry. I think he wants to eat. He wants to eat. Okay. What do you want to eat, Mr. Lion? Oh, he said the apple. Ready? The lion eats the apple. The lion eats the apple. Yum, yummy, yummy, yum, 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 yum. The lion eats the apple. Yum, 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 yum. Oh, he's finished.
That's just a little taste. In the resources that I'll show you as well, I have links to lots of different videos too. So if you're feeling like you don't really know where to start with the aided language simulation, you can always watch some of those videos to kind of get a sense of it. And I will say that puppet eating activities are always a huge hit in intervention. So I'm gonna just kind of go over one of the tools that I will use. This is a core word planner, and this is how I will mentally kind of go through how to like kind of lesson plan for playing different activities that the child might like. So you pick the activity out, then you look at the device that you're using. So if the child is using like touch chat or lamp or proloquo, or using something really specific on their go talk or quick talker, you can kind of pick out what core words or word combinations you might use within that activity, and you could write them in to this like chart area where it has core words and phrases, and then you can also look into the folders to see if there are like specific fringe words that you might be using during that activity, and then if you're using like a low-tech board that's laminated, you could always circle words that you're using with dry eraser markers so that you're able to use them or like have your eye drawn to the words that you're wanting to use within that activity. I also have a bunch of activity specific boards. I think there's like 10 activities that I already have kind of circled with words to emphasize. But I'll show you that in a second as well. I don't know how easy it is to be interactive here, but maybe I'll give you like a couple of, give you like 30 seconds to maybe take a look at this is a touch chat poster board. So if you were playing the activity Mr. Potato Head, maybe take a look and see what types of words you might want to use for playing Mr. Potato Head. And then you could think about maybe some different categories that you might be using in playing Mr. Potato Head as well. I don't know how long to give people to think about it. I'll go for like 20 seconds. Okay. So I think on the next slide, I did put in some like potential ones that you might want to use. So with Mr. Potato Head, you're always putting things on or taking things off. So those are really good ones to use. You might be asked or might be having kids request for more pieces, or asking to get more. You might be asking them like, where should we put the arm? And then in terms of fringe words, you can't really see on the low tech board, but if you were using like a high tech device, you could go into the groups folder and you'd be able to find body parts and clothing. And then if you went into describe, you'd be able to find different colors. So those are like typically the ones that you would use for Mr. Potato Head. But say that that was the activity you wanted to do, you were feeling a little bit like, I don't know where things are located on the device, you could take a look prior to the session to get a sense of where things are located on the system before you do that specific activity you want to play with the child. I just have some like general tips for schools and for home as well. So typically I'll suggest that they print out like core word boards or poster boards like the one here and different sizes. Pop them at the carpet or in the gym or the playground. They can get like big ones blown up, or have small boards at each child's desk. Working with schools, especially if like a child does not have like a dedicated EA, which is usually the case in kindergarten, I'll encourage them to do things with everybody in the class rather than just the one kiddo that like needs the augmentative communication, because it's beneficial for everybody to have some of those sight words, which are those often are the core words, and then also have like some of the picture symbols alongside of those. And I have found too that there's like lots of kids that still benefit from having the augmentative communication, even if they're not referred to a speech pathologist yet, or like because kids are really struggling with their communication skills in general when they're coming into kindergarten, that I've seen anecdotally. For caregivers, I suggest that they print them out in various sizes to put around the home. So putting a board in different rooms, especially in the kitchen and the bedroom and the bathroom where like lots of activities are taking place, to keep a board in the car. And maybe if they're going outside, they could put a board on like a flutter board for playing in the lake or at the pool, or spending time out in the snow as well. And then trying to integrate using it during routine activities as well. Generally as well, I wanted to put this in, especially for people, if you're not specifically working with like the pediatric population, maybe you are coming across AAC users in the work that you're doing. These are some tips that can help you have like a more successful interaction with an AAC user. So first, you want to be patient. It takes a lot of time to be able to develop those messages and use and communicate using augmentative communication systems. Conversation is going to look different as well because it's harder to use nonverbal cues within that conversation. When you have to look down to make the message and then be able to communicate with others. So understanding that conversation is going to look different. So to be a little bit more flexible, you don't want to underestimate the AAC user just because they might have like a slower pace or longer pauses, or maybe aren't using the same level of eye contact because of how they're using the communication system. You might want to invite the user to be able to kind of set the topic of conversation. Oftentimes AAC users are like responding to topics that we bring up. So you can invite them to set the topic, or even to maybe like show a picture of something that they're trying to communicate about so that you have time to look at that while they're crafting their message. You want to also be able to advocate for the AAC user in conversation with others as well, so that making sure that everybody gives them time and pauses so that they can participate within that conversation. You might help them plan ahead for conversations by creating phrases and putting them into folders so that they're able to access quicker communication as they need it. And then using visual supports as well. So even if somebody can use like typing skills, sometimes it's easier to have like some pictures to use for setting the topic, or to help expand on what they want to talk about. And maybe they can use multiple forms of communication, not just their communication device, but maybe it'd be easier for them to use gestures and pointing with visual supports as well. And sometimes it's easier for it to be kind of a level playing field of communicating virtually or online, so that everybody is using the same type of tools to communicate too. And there's some more information about that at the link down there. And we don't have a super long time to talk about resources, but I'll just show you like the image of what like my resources look like. And then you can reach out if you would like a link for it as well. So I typically keep all of my resources on this platform called Padlet. So I share this one out with teachers. There's one that I use with caregivers as well. And it has like different videos and programs and images in there to help with implementation. So there's some more videos about aided language stimulation. There's some more videos about to see what it looks like to model in action. There's some literacy-based activities in this teacher's one. The kindergarten program is something that my colleague and I developed last summer. So like you could feel free to explore that. There's some other activities related to like core word of the week programming. That lesson plan is there. These are some of those pre-made boards with different activities with the words circled. And then there's some information about how to have a like interactive communication boards to be used on a smart board for teachers in schools. And then there's also information about some of the more commonly used communication systems. So there's information about touch chat with videos about how to like edit and that kind of stuff. For LAMP, for TD Snap and TD Motor Plan, and for Prolico to Go. And I have to add some more for some of the other, for Predictable and for Grid as well. But if you reach out to me afterwards, I can send you a link with the information in there for the Padlet. Sorry, I'm gonna go back to my PowerPoint. And then I think I already sent like the slides for this presentation along with the urgent care generic boards as well that you could use like within the hospital setting too. And I think that's it. Don't know if anybody has any questions. It's a lot of information to go over in a short period of time, but I hope that was like a okay introduction for everybody.
If anyone does have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat and I can read them out. Or you can take yourselves off mute and ask your question out loud. Either works for us. Jocelyn, just some notes from the chat, some comments of the fantastic presentation and well done, and thank yous from the attendees. I just wanted to make a note. There was so many good like touch points and things that you brought forward, and it was nice to see them all come together. I really you mentioned this a couple of times throughout the presentation, but I thought it was so important that you highlighted that it's important that you're teaching and it's not a test while you're working with aided language stimulation. I think that's so important. And when I thought of it too, I said, I think that's so important because when I think of especially working with children, you see a picture and you say, point out the lion, right? And that's more of a test than the actual teaching. So I think that's so important. So thank you for mentioning that there.
Of course.
We do have a question in the chat there. And I'm just wondering if you ever find that some children get frustrated with iPads at first because they associate it with a device that has games or TV.
Yeah, it can be difficult. So especially when I'm doing assessment, I'll kind of take that into account if they are super iPad focused at home too. I do use guided access with the iPads. So guided access allows you to like lock into a specific app so they can't like exit that app to go onto different apps on the iPad. And I also, if they have I always say that even if we get an iPad, that it's not for anything other than communication. So if they do have like a tablet at home, I'll often get a case that's like a different color, so that it's more evident that there's a distinction between like, this is my play iPad and this is my talking iPad. Especially and I think too, when you're getting started, the motivating activity is a big piece of it as well, that like you want your activity to be more exciting than just playing on the iPad. So if you really want to make sure that like they're not going to get frustrated if they can't use something else on the iPad, then you really want to make sure that the activities that you're starting with are super engaging and motivating, so that they get more use out of it than just seeing it as the iPad is the game. But sometimes having a mix of like the low tech and the high tech together can help balance that as well.
That's great. Thank you. Jenny, I see that you've got your hand up with the question.
Thanks, Jocelyn. That was a great presentation covering a lot of different communication aspects. I just had a question. I know you focus more on the school age, but I'm curious about the like daycare age, specifically toddler group, because I know you mentioned that a lot of students are coming in to kindergarten maybe with communication skills lacking. So that progress, I guess the toddler stage where they're progressing on their communication skills, how early would you use a picture board, like at what age? And then also, have you seen anything, or is there any risks of potentially using a picture board where the child might revert to just pointing at pictures rather than using their verbal skills if they are in that progressing stage?
So I can use we can use pictures with kids like between 2 and 3 years old, especially if they're coming with like an accompanying diagnosis that would mean that having spoken communication is going to be tricky for them. I've been finding when I've been doing assessments with like daycare age kids, it's typically like around 3 years old that they would be referred to the clinic. But working with like those really young kiddos, sometimes they're just like not ready to be like engaged in the even just in the activity, like the interaction piece of things. So I will sometimes give out like it's essentially like a mini communication book with like 15 really common symbols on kind of the homepage there, and then like flips that have like 5 things within them, and just getting the parent used to using the picture communication while they're communicating with their child. And I've found that like it's more for the parent to start developing those like aided language skills necessarily than like the child really being able to use the pictures right off the bat. But that kind of leads into your second question about like, is that a hindrance then for the child to be like having access to the pictures? And it really is not. Like everything that I have kind of experienced, and then also the research is like any kind of communication that you're working on, whether it be picture, whether it's spoken, using gestures, all kind of works towards the same goal of overall communication skills. It's much more difficult to point to something or to like flip through things to find the word that you're saying if you're able to use your spoken words to say that word. That's like a much quicker thing to do. So I've found the opposite, that like even if you're like introducing communication like devices, oftentimes, especially the ones with the voice output, kids tend to like start using their voice a little bit more because they're practicing based on what they are saying using the communication device, or they're just developing their understanding of language better so that they're able to use the words that they want to as well. I don't know if that fully answers your question or not, but basically, yes, you can use pictures at a pretty young age. It doesn't like do any harm to use pictures to communicate. It just helps them like potentially reduce their frustration while they're working on building their spoken communication skills.
Perfect. Yeah,
But
no, that was great.
Yeah, you do still want to like be developing those interaction skills though too. Like if you have a kiddo that like is not tuned into you at all, you might not get as much expansion as if you work on interaction skills in addition to modeling for things that they might already be communicating. So like for example, within an interaction, like a tickles or swinging or something like that, where they typically are a little bit more focused in on you, then you can be modeling things like more or all done or go during those interactive activities.
Yeah, that makes sense. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries.
Jocelyn, I don't believe we've got any other questions in the chat there, and I don't
Okay.
see any hands up. So I do think we'll clue up the webinar for today. Thank you so much for your time and for presenting on this topic. It was lots of great content and super engaging. So thank you again for that. I do just want to share with everyone on the call our next webinar, which is going to be in June. We do have a little bit of a break in May, just where we have our conference. So our next webinar is chronic pain management in primary care using a biopsychosocial approach and rational prescribing. And our presenter for that is Jay Riam. Jocelyn was a presenter today. And if you are interested in presenting on a webinar in the future, we do invite you to express interest through the speaker interest form. At this time, we do have all of our time slots for 2025 booked, but believe it or not, we are already starting to plan for 2026. So if you are interested in speaking on a topic, please submit your interest form here today. And finally, once again, Jocelyn, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And if anyone has any questions afterwards, if you'd like to connect with Jocelyn or have any questions for myself, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay. Have a great afternoon, everyone.